Hey everyone, welcome to Tech Tip Talk. I'm Sarah Walworth.
I'm Christina McGrath, and we are Knitting Tech Editors.
Intro. Here on Tech Tip Talk, we answer your questions about knitting design, pattern writing, and technical editing. We invite you now to throw any comments or questions you have for us into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer. We're so glad that you all are here live.
So today joining us is Françoise Danoy, who is a globally recognized textile fiber artist and creative business coach who's been inspiring Sarah and me since we first started our businesses. Her rich Franco-Māori heritage and multicultural upbringing lend a truly unique depth to her intricate personal knitwear designs and punch needle pieces. But in addition to designing, she's incredibly gifted at mentoring and empowering others to realize their artistic potential and is a veritable force in our industry. And we are so honored to have her on.
All right, let's bring her up.
Bring her in.
All right. Hey, Françoise, we're so glad that you are here with us. Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here.
So we're so excited to have you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And we're just going to jump straight into questions because that's how we roll.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Go ahead, Christina. What do you want to start with?
We like to start at the beginning. So how did you get started working in the knitting industry, fiber industry?
Okay, that's a great story that I love sharing. So I've been in the industry for almost a decade now. So my story of how I got into the knitting industry started January 2nd, 2014. And I can remember that date because that is when I set my New Year's resolution on I want to learn how to knit. I set that because I was like in this weird limbo period of my life. I was living with my parents in the States, waiting to receive my U.S. citizenship, so that way I could go to Japan and live with my former husband. So that way I didn't have to worry about green card stuff and all that. So I was like in an 8-month waiting period, and I was like, I'm bored. And I saw my mom knitting, and I was like, can you just teach me how to knit? And it was just nothing more than I just want to have some sort of creative hobby to help pass the time. I didn't really think much about it, but it was pretty much love at first stitch for me. And then when I moved to Japan, I told everybody, it's like, I'm going to start a knitwear design business, even though I just started to learn how to knit. I just started designing, and I have no idea how to run a business. But I was like, even though I don't know what I don't know, and there's a lot of things I do know that I don't know, I'm going to figure it out. And that's what I ended up doing while I was in Japan. I figured out how to build a business, figured out how to design knitwear while also learning how to knit at the same time. Over my career as a knitwear designer for 7 years, I launched over 100 patterns. I also launched my program, the Swatch Studio Circle, which is where I taught other aspiring designers my process for the knitwear design process. Right now, where I am now, after some, like I mentioned, former husband, now I'm back in the United States. So I've been through a lot of life shifts, transitions. My Saturn return just came up to me and slapped me in the face. It's time for some personal growth. And I was like, no, I don't want it. But then I was thinking while I was going through, I was like, well, this would make a really interesting part of my autobiography when I write it later on. So whatever, character development, built, all that good stuff. So I am starting to shift a little bit away from designing knitting patterns and shifting over into punch needle. But knitwear is always going to have my, it's my first forever love. And I'll always be super grateful for it. But where I am now, there's some big shifts happening.
That's exciting though, because I think that's part of being a creative is you're always changing and morphing and finding new things to be excited about. How did you get interested in punch needle art?
Punch needle. So it's a very similar story to how I got into knitting. Over the past few years, I dabbled in other fiber arts like dyeing, spinning, weaving. But when I first picked up the knitting needles, I was kind of hit with this vision of me interpreting my cultural background into knitting patterns. And that vision didn't happen with the other mediums that I picked up until I picked up punch needle. Like the moment I started doing it, all of a sudden, all these images just flashed through my mind. I was like, oh, okay, I feel like this is inspiration or my ancestors talking to me, telling me this is the next path to go down to. Because I've always considered knitwear design, for me at least, my approach, my why for why I designed knitwear was I kind of considered like a visual journal, a visual diary of my connection, of my journey to connecting back to my cultural heritage, my indigenous heritage, the Māori, the indigenous people of New Zealand. So I've kind of used knitwear as a way to, as like that documentation of that journey and sharing that with other people, hoping to inspire them, for their own self-discovery, self-expression. And I found that punch needle is like the next step in that creative process and that journey for me, because it scratches that itch of, because I really like doing digital art. I did a lot of that growing up, but never had a chance to really incorporate that into my knitting. So punch needle kind of combines those two worlds, like digital art, because I draw my designs out first, transferred onto the fabric, and then my love of yarn and fiber to essentially painting with yarn. So that's how I got into punch needle.
It's very cool.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome. It's so important when to feel challenged and feel inspired in this industry. So it's so cool all the different ways it's gone for you.
So you've worked extensively with designers and knitwear designers. Have you also worked with crochet designers, or mostly knitwear?
A few crochet designers, yes.
And
but
so
knitwear.
What qualities do you feel a design business needs to be successful?
That is a really good question. I think actually, the part that I actually want to focus on here is successful or success, because I think everybody's definition of success is going to be different. Before, when I was, when I was starting out my business in Japan, I definitely was equating success to like, 6-figure business, maybe even 7-figure business, being the hustler, the girl boss and stuff like that, hustling, working hard. Now, for me, success looks a little bit different. Now it's just more like that softness and ease and flow and having that bit of grace for myself. So first of all, I think your first thing is, what does success look like for you? And that is really, I think, tied to what your purpose and what your vision is for yourself, for the type of life that you want to live and how that business can help support that. But I would say overall, what's going to be really important is consistency, motivation, and discipline. Because those are the things that are going to help you take those action steps that you need to take every day in order to make your vision, bring your business to life. There was another one that's a good one to have is, actually, hold up. I'm also going to recommend this book. But there was
books.
one.
We love books.
I've got books. I want to find it to balance agility and consistency. Essentially, to develop those day-to-day habits, those things that you can do day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, but also being agile enough to make adjustments and pivots as needed based on, hold on. Do not call me, people. There we go. Getting phone calls right in the middle of this. So yeah, that be agile, agility and consistency. That's another quality that's really important to have.
So what was the book that you just held up?
Okay, so not super exciting, but let me just say, these series of books and the Harvard Business Review series, they're so good. Oh my gosh, I love these books. So this one I got called Thinking Strategically, because right now in my day business, I'm getting the feedback. If you want to move forward, you need to learn how to think strategically. It's like, how do you do that? What action items can I take to learn how to think more strategically? But actually, the book that I would recommend, or any like skill set that I would recommend for any business owner, especially when you're starting out, project management skills. So friggin' important. Learning how to manage projects, because that also helps. I know this was like a question for later on, but essentially, I think when we get into, especially when we're starting out for the first time, we're a little bit lost and a little bit unfocused. Having a good foundation in project management, and also being able to, think about what our strategic vision, and then working backwards, breaking things down into like 90-day projects and focusing on those projects one step at a time. That consistency helps build or get you that momentum that you want to get forward, to move forward.
Right. So, awesome. Yeah. I love this. Any kind of resources to make us better at what we what we need to do. Here's the thing though, is that I feel like this is super crucial, is we got to take what's been successful in other industries and bring it into ours. We don't need to be our own little bubble where we're trying to figure out things from the ground level.
Like there are some things that are going to be specific to this, and there are some things that carry over through any kind of successful ventures. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think are the biggest hurdles designers come up against that you've seen in working with them? Is obviously project management's a big one.
So for biggest hurdles, if I had to put them into two, go ahead.
Sorry, I was thinking this question to me is like, when you're working with these designers and they're trying to implement all these things, like what is the biggest thing that they're coming up against that doesn't work right?
For me, I kind of put them into two main categories. You have the mindset and then the mechanisms. The mindset portion, at least for me, and also actually something that I can really relate to, is that when I have these self-sabotaging thoughts, all these limiting beliefs about myself, my actions in my business would also be a reflection of the way that I thought about myself. So if I thought that my work wasn't good, then I wasn't going to share it. And if I don't share it, then nobody's going to see it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's like the first part, is just really analyzing the mindset and also just gaining that confidence and that inner self-confidence in ourselves in order to make those scary moves, and just giving ourselves that permission to put our work out there. And the second part is what I call the mechanisms, which is all about the operation side of the business. I realized that I really love operations, and that just helps things run smoothly. It's all about planning things out and taking the time to document things, get them onto paper and out of your head. Just over the past month, I have been working on my documentation skills. Like if the moment something comes into my head, I'm like, oh, this is a good idea, or I need to get this done, I put it down onto paper or into my notes app. And then later on, I will transfer it over into my project management tool as like a specific action-oriented task. And I found just from doing those simple things, the mental load just lifted from me. And all of a sudden I had so much more energy because I wasn't trying to hold everything in here. So even though like thoughts don't physically weigh anything, the mental weight that they hold is just really like, it's kind of astounding, like how much they can hold, like how much space they can take up in your mind. And since learning how to implement proper documentation practices or habits, I found that I'm actually just able to focus on just doing so much more. So I think that's also part of it. Like, if there was one thing to teach knitwear designers or aspiring business owners, don't keep things in your head. Even if you have a note, like your notes app on your iPhone, just write it down on there. Get it out. Do not expect your mind to hold it. You will lose it. And then also you'll just stress yourself out from trying to remember everything. It just makes things so much easier.
Yeah, exactly. That's excellent advice. That's fantastic.
It doesn't take long either. When Sarah and I are writing together, she'll say something great. I'll be writing and I'll go, wait, what did you say a second ago? What was that sentence? She'll go, I don't know. I have no idea. It doesn't take long.
No. How do you document things? Do you do things digitally? Do you do things on paper? What do you find works best for you?
So for those, I use a combination of both. When I'm planning out my day, I have my handy dandy physical planner. But then I also use digital tools such as ClickUp, and that is where I hold most of my like project management. So all of my projects and the day-to-day tasks. And usually what I like to do is I like to take a look at what task I've done today, do for the day, and then write it up into my planner in a more organized way. So that way I can actually, sometimes it can get a little bit overwhelming. So I need to organize a little bit more just to get everything, into the right categories and buckets. But I also use Notion as my knowledge database management. So if I come across something I read or listened to that was really interesting, again, it's about documenting it, writing it down, and organizing it into the right categories. So that way, if I want to reference it later, I can go back to that. So I definitely try to use a lot of the digital tools to help organize things.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what do you think for designing? Like, what are the tools that you would recommend? Like, just seeing the landscape of what's available now, do you feel like people could do a better job of design working through the process by doing digitally, like working in Notion or ClickUp, or is it something that, you know, it's great to just do it on a giant board, like a whiteboard or something?
I think that really does depend on the person. And I really believe more in like having a bespoke system instead of saying like, this is what I use and you should too. Because this what the tools that I use in the process and the system that I developed is for me and myself in the way that my particular brain works and the habits I had to implement. But I would say good skills to really focus on project management, self-management, time management, task management, email management, and knowledge management, all those different management areas. Those would be like the skill set to really focus on, and then finding the right tools or the right process that best work for you in those areas.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because everyone's brain is gonna
everyone's brain works differently.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this a little bit already, but how did your culture come to inform your work?
So great question. So I answered that a little bit at the beginning when I was talking about how I got into knitting into punch needle, but essentially I consider knitwear design, the punch needle works that I create as like a visual journal or visual diary of my journey to connecting back to my culture. So it's whether it's my personal stories or things that I learn as I learn more about where I come from. I find ways to translate that into a knitting pattern, into a stitch, or in some sort of visual, visual form.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you find that it helps you to engage with your culture more, or is it more as a way of presenting your culture to other people? Like, is it for you or is it for your audience?
I would say first and foremost, it is for me because it is my own personal journey of connecting. But the way that I present it to my audience is kind of like, this is my story. Find what resonates and let's connect through that. And I hope it inspires others to start their own journey of self discovery and self-expression.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really powerful. Is how you being able to do that is going to inspire other people to do that if maybe they wouldn't have thought of that. You know, I think that's really powerful.
Hey, we're getting feedback, Frenchie. Can you lower the fan just a little? And I'm wondering if that might help it to get better sound. There we go.
Hopefully, if that works.
It works. So tell us, what kind of advice would you give a designer just starting out?
So let's see. Now that I have like 10 years of experience under my belt and so many other experiences, I think when you're just starting out, I'm actually going to think about what I did when I was first starting out with my punch needle. When I was like, okay, I'm going to start having like this punch needle. I'm going to say punch needle business, but punch needle's aspect to my work. So essentially, I was kind of starting from a little bit from the ground up, and not 100%. But the first thing that I did when I was delving into punch needle was, first of all, creating as much punch needle pieces as I could to refine my practice and to build a portfolio. And so in terms of knitwear for designing, maybe it's, because knitting up takes a lot of time, but I think first just practicing creating a quantity of designs, and even if it's just sketching and it actually become like actual designs. The part of that is from, like, I learned this like little quip. It was like quantity over quality when you're first starting, especially when it comes to the artistic practice, because it is through that quantity, through the practice, that you're able to get better. And that's what I really focused on when I was starting out with punch needle, was just focusing on it. And this could apply to anything when you're first starting out, is just put out crap it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, at least you are actually in the process of creating. And it's through that, when you get that practice, that's when you're able to refine things. Because if you focus too much on making that perfect piece,
it may never happen.
It may never happen. And also I've noticed that when people say like, oh, I'm so focused on perfection, and I actually look at their work, it's not really good. I know that sounds awful, but like, it's like, wow, you're so focused on perfection that you didn't actually determine whether your work was actually good or not. But if you just focus on just like, when I first started with punch needle, my goal was just like every single day I'm just going to draw up a sketch so that way I could get the practice down. At the end of the week, I would choose my favorite sketch, work that into a punch needle design, and then just do that for like a few months. Right. And by the end, I would go back and redo some of my older punch needle pieces because I was able to create my process, find out what materials I liked, find out what yarn I liked, and also figured out actually how to use the tools properly, what actually makes it, look detailed, and common mistakes and things like that. So that's kind of the approach that I took when I was starting out. And then after that, I went into my second phase, which was like, okay, time to actually think about who my audience for this is. I actually tried selling my punch needle pieces to my knitting audience because since they don't really know how to do punch needles, like, oh, I'll just sell them my pieces. I found out that actually didn't work. They're way more interested in me teaching them how to do punch needle. Again, knitters, we want to make stuff. So I was like, okay, that actually makes sense that they would be more interested in learning how to make the punch needle pieces instead of buying my own. So in terms of me, when it comes to me selling my finished punch needle pieces, I'm actually reaching out to galleries and yarn shops, or not yarn shops, shops in New Zealand, because their audience are people who want to purchase finished items. And so once I understood that, like who my audience was for my finished work, I'm just focusing on, so for my finished pieces, they're going to this particular audience, which is galleries, art shops, gift shops in New Zealand. And then on one thing that I'm going to be working on next is building out my workshop portfolio. So that way I can approach yarn shops and say like, hey, would you like me to teach workshops? And then I know later down the road, possibly creating kits for my audience, because again, they're more interested in making their own versions rather than buying my finished version, if that makes sense. So I think having an understanding of who your product is for that audience, and then going to where that audience is.
But first, making a lot. Like you have to make a lot. You have to go through that process a lot and then hone in on who your thing is for. Do you find that it works both ways? Like you create the thing and then you find the audience, or do you create the thing for a particular person? Like which way does it go for you, as like where you find that zen of working as a designer?
Yeah, there definitely is that magical intersection, where what you want to do versus what your audience wants. So one idea that I was thinking about pursuing was that I was like, oh, maybe one reason why they don't want to purchase my punch needle pieces is because my audience is US based, so maybe I needed to make something that's a little more US themed or something like that. And then I realized I don't want to do that. That's not me. So there's also that part of just like, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. So I adjusted, shifting like, okay, this is going to be this is going to be the audience that I'm going to focus on for this particular piece that is more aligned with what I want to do. So it's I guess it is a bit of a balance. And also just the way that you market or storytell about your work, that also can help a lot in finding that audience.
That's exciting. I think that's probably the trickiest part for any designer, is finding the audience, the people that you connect with, and building them into your super fans. It's a hurdle because you're creating your art, you love your art, but now I have to find the people that love it. So,
yep.
And want to buy it and buy all of it.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and it's so great what you said before about you really learn, you learn how to do your job best by doing it, and by doing it and doing it and doing it. And you really do need to, it's like, if you don't love what you're doing and you don't want to do it, it's going to be really hard to do it well. It's going to be hard.
Yes.
Exactly. Oh, we have a
question
from Jen Hurley, who says, can you tell us about your Pay What Works payment scale for patterns? So we're going to dive into the valuation of our work here.
So I will say the pay what works payment scale was not my original idea. I got it from Nat from Wolf and Fawn Knits. But this has been something that I think that Christina, you had mentioned earlier, is like things happening in other industries and kind of like borrowing those ideas and applying it to our own, like taking those different practices. Because I've seen the pay what works payment scale in other industries. Like I've actually seen it for like therapy sessions and things like that, just finding ways to make work more accessible. And so for me, I personally implemented the pay what works scale to help with that balance of valuing my work, but then also making my work accessible to people. When I did implement that scale in there, I did end up raising the prices, like the top end of my prices overall, because I was like, I am putting in the scale in place, and now I'm actually feel more comfortable showing what the actual work value of my patterns is, because there's a lot of work that goes in, but I also want to make sure that people still have access to my work. Now, of course, I do have free patterns available, and then the payment scale. But again, I would say that this is a method that works for me. Not everybody uses this system, and they don't have to. So it's just really about like, what are your values? What is your overall mission? And does this particular structure or strategy work with that?
So is it working for you? Do you feel like you'll continue with that?
Yeah, I've enjoyed implementing that. And you know, I haven't really seen like any decrease in my sales. Like it's been consistent overall. So yeah, I'm definitely going to continue keeping that in. I would say I would keep it just for my digital patterns. I cannot apply that particular type of scale for like my punch needle work, considering they are one-off unique pieces and they are physical pieces, as far as digital, you know, they can be replicated, you know, multiple times. So yeah, that is going to be where I will not be applying the pay what works scale for that.
Was it hard to figure out the tech side of that, or of like doing a scaled price, or is there a shopping cart that lets you do that easily on your website?
So I do it through Ravelry and Payhip. With Payhip, they have their own like pay what work system, and then Ravelry I just set up coupon codes.
Yeah.
So the tech actually isn't really that difficult. So you just have to get creative with what they have on the platform.
Because I feel like
it doesn't have to really be a barrier.
It doesn't need to be a barrier. You can figure it out easily.
Yeah.
Would you how did you price the top tier? We talk a lot about value on with other designers, and we feel like there's a lot of undervaluing of our work in the fiber industry. So how did you figure out that top tier?
Oh, I don't want to say like it's an arbitrary number.
Is it arbitrary? Did you just throw a dart at the wall?
I mean, essentially, I did garments, $15, shawls, $12, hats and cowls, $9, and then maybe smaller pieces like hats, $6, cowls, $9. I mean, it was just depending on like how much work I felt was involved. Like if there was grading, then it was definitely going to be in like the top tier for shawls, because there's a lot of charts that were involved, and making sure all the written and chart instructions were fleshed out. I was like, oh yeah, I'm putting this at $12.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. So, and you haven't seen a change in purchases. It hasn't put off people that you're using the system.
Awesome. I think that's a big misunderstanding. I think that it's not going to. I don't think always raising your prices is going to make people not want your thing. I don't think it always means that. And we often think that, but I don't think it doesn't mean that.
That's great. You know? So tell us, let's grab the next question, Christina.
Okay. So what are you excited about now?
Yeah, we want to hear this.
I am really excited about, I guess, my next stage in my professional and personal growth. I mean, since 2020, I was not in a good place mentally. Looking back, I was like, holy crap, I was depressed, like big D depression and stuff like that. And also going through like lots of life shifts and stuff like that. I got massively burnt out on knitting, just lost my joy and my spark for what I was doing. And that was really difficult to cope with, because I was like, I really identified strong with being like a knitwear designer. This is who I am. And if I'm not doing this, then who am I? So it was definitely much like that dark night of the soul type of situations, like trying to just get back on my feet, and getting myself in a place that was better mentally and physically. So that was like the first thing that I really focused on over the past few years, was just working on my mental health. And that did involve me taking a step back from my business work for a couple years. But that was very much necessary and very much needed. And now, since the beginning of January, I've seen so many huge development in my own personal and professional and personal growth, and my skill sets, and also just my confidence and emotional resilience, that I'm starting to feel really excited about where I'm going now with my punch needle work. Like, I am starting to do outreach to galleries and shops in New Zealand, just starting to build those partnerships. Just starting slowly, building up things slowly in my business again, and finding a way that's more sustainable, and putting in and applying the lessons that I've learned over the past few years into the work that I do. I also work, I have a day job where I work for Magical Teams. So I'm part of a hiring and operations consultancy. And that has taught me so much, just in terms of like running the business behind the scenes, and also just, working on those particular skill sets that I mentioned earlier. My boss, I've been really fortunate to be to work for a startup, essentially, that really values mentorship, and helping create structures for yourself, because a lot of people who work there are neurodivergent. So the way that our brains work, the way that we need to work and just survive is very different. So actually, my boss was the one who really helped me set up these structures. Like, she sat down with me and just like really walked me through this process of like, what do you need for yourself to be able to produce your most excellent work, essentially. So it was a lot of tough love over the past year, but it's starting to really pay off, and I'm bringing those skills to other businesses. Like, I'm also I call myself a systems and project specialist for a company down in New Zealand, another Maori-owned startup business. I originally came on as like the social media content creator, but when I saw what was going on behind the scenes, I was like, I need to clean this up. I need to become the operations manager or whatever. So I was just like, okay, I need to, yeah. So I was like, I see what's going on here. You need help, and I would like to help you get better. So I'm just really enjoying this new stage of my life, like being part of a team, having some really awesome coworkers, and just working on developing these particular skills that I mentioned earlier, because I'm able to take what I'm learning in my day job and apply it into my business. And even though I'm juggling like 3-4 different things, I'm able to find a way to manage it all, essentially. So yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited for what the rest of the year is going to bring for the next upcoming years. I feel like I've found that creative spark, that joyful life again, and that's what I'm just really excited about. Just feeling that joyful life again.
That's awesome. That must feel really good.
It does.
Expansive is the word that comes to mind. Like, you're growing, expanding as a person. That's pretty exciting. And let's grab some questions.
We have another question from Ruth. Having had the experience of burning out of one skill area of fiber arts, are there things you're doing differently as you approach a new creative business?
What a great question.
Yes, that is such a good question. The reasons for my burnout was multifaceted. I was coming in from multiple areas at once, experiencing emotional abuse, not from my marriage, thankfully. Me and my ex-husband were still very close, but experiencing emotional abuse among people that I considered friends, that can definitely just like take everything out of you. And then also the separation from my husband, even though it was amicable, it was still a really difficult process to come to terms with. Moving back to the States, because I was like, I don't want, when I left America the first time, I was like, I'm leaving America and I don't ever want to come back again. And now I'm like, oh, I'm back here again. So there was all these little things, and so all that all together did lead to a burnout. But what I'm doing now is, I think one of the biggest things is setting boundaries. I like setting boundaries for how I interact with social media. or in how people interact with me on social media, and I'm being afraid, like, okay, I'm not afraid to block people, or just, creating my own experience on social media. Making sure to take time for my own self-care, and not just like in terms of like bubble baths and well, even though I still like doing that, but like really taking care of myself physically, emotionally, mentally. And sometimes that means, hey, I do need to put in some habits or routines, like going to, getting some daily movement in, eating better, and making sure I get enough sleep. And sometimes in order to do that, I have to say no to other things by setting those boundaries, like making sure it's good for me. And then setting up systems, processes, and routines, because even though I haven't been formally diagnosed, I highly suspect that I am neurodivergent myself. And so essentially, I wrote this on my threads the other day. Just like I wear glasses to manage my eyesight, I have these other tools and resources to help manage other areas of my life that make it a little bit difficult for me to function. So things like my habits of like writing things down on my phone, or scheduling things, or these other little habits, it just makes things so much easier for me. So again, I think it's just like the one thing that I'm doing more consciously that I would, for especially to prevent that burnout, is to get everything out of my head and onto paper, setting up systems, setting up routines, and setting up processes. That really helps a lot with preventing burnout, because you're not trying to keep everything in your head.
So that leads to the other question we got in a comment, is when design inspiration comes, how do you like to record your ideas when you may not be able to start experimenting right away? It's a great question.
So when it's great question. So when it is a design inspiration, I would just get on my iPad and just draw it. So I use the app Procreate. So I take my Apple Pencil, my iPad, and just start drawing down ideas and notes. So that way, at least it's down onto paper. Or onto some sort of like, essentially out of my head. If it's like an idea that I want to write for my newsletter or a social media post, then I'll write it up into my notes app. But if it's like a design idea, then I'll take it to Procreate and just start drawing some things down there.
Right. That's fantastic. And then do you create folders in Procreate for it, or or is it just like this massive grid of ideas?
I think I do need to organize my Procreate folder a little bit more, but yeah, I have a combination of folders and then things falling outside of the folders. So, it's always a work in progress for, managing things and organizing things properly.
And so I want to swing back around to not burning out. You didn't say this, but I would assume that not burning out means that you're not doing punch needle 14 hours a day, right?
No, and I
boundaries for yourself on your craft, on your artistic pursuits, on what do you like limit yourself so that you don't do it too much, or what do you do that's different than when you were knitting all the time?
So I learned a lot. I took a lot of like, oh my gosh, this is teaching me things about life. So when I started working out last year, because I was like, I read somewhere on the internet, it was like a meme, it's like, lift heavy circles, it's better for your mental health. And I was like, well, I'm hit rock bottom mentally, so maybe I'll try lifting those heavy circles. And unfortunately, they were right. When I lift heavy circles, I feel a lot better about myself. But essentially what I learned from that routine of like moving my body every day, like one thing that's really important when it comes to strength training is that you need to have rest days, because your body cannot handle that intensity every single day. And it's actually when you incorporate rest that allows your muscles to repair and to grow stronger. So if you were to compare somebody who was working 7 days a week, just going every single day, versus somebody who worked 3 days, worked out 4 days a week and had those rest periods, the person with the rest periods over time would be way more stronger than the person going every day. And that's what I kind of had to learn, was just thinking about making my work sustainable. And also just like realizing like, yeah, you don't have to hit the gym hard, like 3 hours a day, like 30 to 45 minutes is plenty enough. And doing that consistently every day, I've made like really huge, no pun intended, gains in terms of like my strength training. And so I've been applying that to punch needle too. It's just like, 30 to 45 minutes every day. But sometimes I get into a flow as well. So sometimes I can turn into 3 hours, but I'm really enjoying the process. So that kind of just helps. But then also just allowing myself to give myself rest, and also just thinking about the long term. vision. Like, yes, I have these dreams of where I want to be, but I don't have to get it all done right now. Like, I can take it one step at a time. In fact, I have to kind of take it one step at a time, otherwise I'll burn out. Or if I'm not seeing the success coming in as quickly as I want, then it'll be discouraging. It's just understanding that it kind of is like, instead of like viewing it as a linear progress, it's more exponential. So there's going to be a time where it's going to look flat for a while, and then all of a sudden it's going to go whoosh. But sometimes you have to really push through that flat period. But that's where you start developing the habits, the consistency, developing the processes and the systems. So that way, once you hit that point where it starts going off, then you're just like, okay, I've got everything in place. I'm good for that trajectory.
I love it. That's fantastic. And that's really that. I think that could apply to not just artistic pursuit, not just weight training. It could apply to almost everything related to human living.
Yes. I was like, oh my God.
Excellent.
Well, and prioritizing yourself, like you said, taking care of yourself and just basically prioritizing yourself and what you need.
You are your most important part of anything creative is you, and your mental health is super important to that too. So thank you for sharing that with us. That's fabulous. We have a question that we ask every guest, and so we want to see what you answer. And of course, you might be completely different from people who've asked before. What is your favorite knitting or crochet notion? I don't know if you crochet, but we put it up there.
Let's see. What is my favorite knitting notion?
Or like, what's the tool that you defer to all the time? Like you could not live without it when you're doing any of your work.
Okay, so I'm not going to answer knitting needles, but my knitting needle holder.
Oh,
because or else those things are going to get lost everywhere.
Do you use a roll, or do you have like a box? Do you have like
the roll? Yeah, I use the roll.
I love it.
Yep, I need that. That's super helpful. That's my favorite, and I like collecting those bags too. So it's like, yeah, I love those.
And especially because they can be custom made too, right? Like
yes.
Well, I think you're the first one. We have had somebody say bags before, but never a needle holder.
Project bags.
Needle holder.
Yeah.
You are definitely the first one who said that. Yeah. I think stitch markers is still the most one, but then we have the barber cords are coming in second, I think.
For people who create sweaters, yeah.
Nice.
So, where can people find you online?
I can share it.
And we'll throw the links into the comments below.
So originally people could find me online as Araha Knits, and that was the name of my knitwear design business. But because now I'm kind of expanding outside of knitting, I've actually just changed my business name to my name. So Françoise Danoy. So FrancoiseDanoy.com for my website, and then Françoise.Danoy for Instagram. So essentially, if you just look although if you do look up Araha Knits, like if you write arahanits.com, it will just redirect you to my updated website. So, yeah, that's where I am now.
And so now you are not focusing just on knitwear design, but you're also providing some coaching for people.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So last year I did shut down the Swatch Studio Circle. Again, that was related to a bit of burnout. I was just like, I actually don't have the energy and the motivation to continue this going, but I did realize that I do love interacting and coaching with people, especially on like a one-on-one aspect. So in these coaching programs, or the type of coaching that I would like to be doing is just working with people, aspiring designers, or people who maybe even a little bit more established, is just like taking a look at what their business operations looks like and just helping them streamline things, organize things, just make it just run smoother, so that way they can focus on doing the things that they actually like to be doing, because sometimes doing the little operations things is not super exciting, but I do love building that stuff out.
I love it. Yeah, and we all could use that kind of help. I mean, because we're creative entrepreneurs, we have to do it all ourselves, right? So it's lovely to have help from an outside viewpoint.
Well, and working with someone one-on-one like that is a model that works really well for growth and accomplishing accomplishing
Yes.
accomplishing goals.
Mm-hmm.
So, Leslie, our fellow Texan, Austin here, are you looking forward to any upcoming fiber events or
Yes.
festival? Tell us about it.
So I'm going to be teaching at the Dallas Fort Worth Fiber Festival in September. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one.
What do you
That's the main one that I have. I am teaching my mini shawl construction class. So the shawl ABCs, asymmetrical, basic, and crescent. Nice. So I'm going to be teaching those classes as well as knitwear design 101. So just the basic process to knitwear design. I'm also teaching some workshops on punch needle hill crunchy weavers in Austin later this year. And I think those are the main ones that I'm teaching at for right now. But I am also going to be working on doing some outreach to yarn shops or other festivals just to get my name out there and be like, hey, I teach workshops. Let's talk.
Let's hook up.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. It was really fun chatting with you about your process and about everything that you have done to grow as a person and as a creative. Thanks for being here today, Françoise. It's so fun to talk to you.
So great. So fascinated to hear everything you have to say.
Thank you so much for having me on board today.
Yes, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thanks everyone for being here live. We certainly appreciate that you guys could join us. This broadcast is made possible because of our patrons. Mm-hmm. Some of our patrons are here in the chat. We love seeing you guys here.
Thank you. You're the best.
If you are interested in being part of an active and vibrant community of designers and knitting and crochet technical editors, come and join us on Patreon. We'll throw that into the chat below. We'd love to have you come on in. We have a busy Discord channel and we do knit nights twice a month. And what else? We answer all your questions. We're available. It seems like
we're available if you want access. Yep, we're available. You can even have a private chat with us once a month if that's something that you need.
Yes.
And it's flexible. So
yep, we'd love to have you. And please do subscribe here. Hit the subscribe button so that you get notified when we go live. Sign up for our newsletter. We send once a week now. Yay, Christina's busy writing, and we recap a lot of the information that we're going to be providing in our book. So exciting news is our book is available at the pre-order link below, and feel free to order now or come see us at Rhinebeck and get your copy signed by us live. We will be there in October at the New York wool. Is it sheep? Sheep and wool. I always want to say wool and sheep, but it's sheep and wool.
Sheep and wool. Yeah. So the book is being published at the very end of October, but we'll have copies to sign and sell at Rhinebeck the previous week
at the Merit Book booth. So. Thanks for being here with us, you all. It's really fun to chat with you and to have your input as we talk to our guests. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for being here.
We'll see you next month with yet another guest on Tech Tip Talk. Bye. Outro.